Hello everybody, I hope wherever you're watching us from you're having a great time. This is Every Post and welcome to today's video. Now, over the past few years, there has been this tension that exists between Africa and Europe. And this comes from the fact that for many years, Europe being the colonizer of Africa has been seen as an aggressor, as somebody who does not want Africa to develop. And this has led to a call where people and most experts are saying that Europe does not want to see Africa develop because when Africa develops, Europe and Asia will vanish. Now, this is what we want to talk about today in this video. In 2022, 6 European nations and African Union held a summit in Brussels. And the main call in this summit was that there was need for financing recovery in Africa. And that was what most African leaders who attended that summit needed. But then, if you look at it today in 2024, the things that were talked about in this summit, where Europe was supposed to facilitate financing of development within Africa to ensure that Africa also gets at par with other nations, these kind of commitments that were made have not been fully met. So it is really fair to ask this question: is Europe desiring to have development in Africa? Many Africans have said that this cannot happen. Europe can never at any point support development in Africa. And if they support it because they know there is something out of it that they're going to gain. So to give us a better perspective of this topic, we have Honorable Sidia Jata, who is a Gambian political leader and commentator. He was speaking at Ohio University, and the speech he made there sent a shockwave to the entire European Union. Let's listen to this speech, then come back and talk about it more.
Europe will never ever let Africa develop and be like Europe. That is to their detriment. They said it. I'm telling you, the views of an European academic conference on the issue. And they were so honest to say that if they allow Africa to develop, Europe and Asia will perish. That any African country that wants to develop, you have to fight. This is honestly, the academics are talking exactly this. You have to fight. Because we will not allow you to go, because your going away to develop is to our detriment. So we sit there and we say, they give you aid, they give you grant. These are traps. Traps. If you want to pay all your loans to the devil, who has ever listened to Ruto, the current president of Kenya? He told them they wanted to pay all their loans. They said, no, don't worry, don't pay all. Because you know what that means? You pay all, you become a free person. Ghana and South Korea were independent almost in the same year. And at that time, Ghana's GDP was much higher than South Korea. But Korea is totally different from Ghana today. Ghana, with all the riches that it has, gold, diamond, petrol, name it. South Korea doesn't have that. But South Korea is today in their so-called first world. And Ghana still is totally in the so-called third world, whatever that means to them. And nobody questions that. Why is it that South Korea has developed and Ghana has not developed? It is one reason. Because South Korea used a tool which is common to everybody in the country. And we in Ghana, in Gambia, in Nigeria, everywhere else, we use a tool which is alien to the vast majority of our population. And we are happy because we have the privilege. They have no access to that privilege. For one to have been capable of to speak a foreign language and write in a foreign language. But our constitution recognizes our language. South Africa, the constitution recognizes 11 languages. That is why you see sometimes parliamentarians, when you speak in the South African parliament, they are called switching between English, Zulu, and any other language. Senegal also, that is what happens there now. But that is not enough. It is not a question of code switching. It's a question of sticking to the code is a disconnect between the child's education because the language he or she speaks in the school is totally different from the language he or she speaks at the home. The father and mother are not involved in the child's education because they are totally ignorant of the language that is being used to educate him or her. And we don't question that. Africans, what is wrong with us? Is this the way we are going to develop? It is not possible. I say, and anybody who doesn't agree, challenge me. It is not possible for us to move the way we have chosen. This is the bad way. Raymond Dumont was right. A French agronomist, he wrote a book in 1960. The title was L'Afrique est mal partie, false start in Africa. He is very right. And that is why we are still tottering with development. Is it not a paradox that Africa, the richest continent in the whole world, a continent which is in fact the birthplace of humanity, human life started in Africa and spread to the rest of the world. We should have been the light of the world, but now we are the wretched of the earth. How long are we going to remain in this? If you are not tired being a slave, you should not allow your children to fall into that same trap. It is our responsibility to stop that. It is time we woke up. It is time we woke up. It is time we decided to be what we are supposed to be. We cannot continue to live in the world and want to be in partnership with people, to be equal to others, when we have hanging on our necks a foreign language. Linguistic chain is surrounded in everybody's neck, to a point that you cannot even talk sometimes. How many mathematicians are we destroying on the continent? How many philosophers are we denying? How many scientists are we denying on our continent? Because of using languages which are alien to ourselves. I'm not proud to speak the way I am speaking. I could speak better if you could understand my language. And I can speak to you from now up to tomorrow. I will not use a single English word in my sentence. But if I ask any of you here, those of you who have never taken interest to learn your own languages, if I ask you to write your sentence now, first, the sentence will be just one word, because you would not know how to segment the composition of your sentence. So you just write one big long thing. And then you say you are illiterate. You are all illiterate. In my eyes, you are all illiterate. And this is the fear. Because you don't want to accept that currently, even though you speak and write English, you are illiterate. And for us to take off for development, you need to go back to school. This is what you don't want to. I don't like military regimes, but there was one military regime I applauded. That was Siad Barre when he overthrew the government in 1969 in Somalia. 1974, he gave an ultimatum to civil service. Anybody who could not read and write in Somali within a certain period, whatever position you occupied in the civil service, you would lose it. He closed the whole school system for a given period, during which they developed a writing system for the transcription of Somali. There are over 100 languages in Somalia. But fortunately, 98% of the Somalis speak Somali. So that was a big occasion for them. From 1975 to date, the language, only language of education and officialdom in Somali is Somali. Everything is done in Somali, from preschool to university. And recently, was diversating between first French was official language, then English. Now they decided, seriously, leadership is fundamental to all this. They said, well, we cannot continue this way. Since the main language in Rwanda, Kinyarwanda, is closely related to Swahili, they decided to adopt Swahili as the official language. And for more than 2 years now, Swahili is the language of education and administration in Rwanda. I've named you only 2 countries on the whole continent so far. Deliberately, I'm not including Tanzania, because even though Tanzania speaks Swahili and it is an official language, but English is also another official language in Tanzania. Kenya also the same. So that is why I have given my life to the development of African languages. And that is why when I came back from France, after I had tried to implement their own policy, because I wrote their own language policy, they used pre-Gambian languages to be developed, to be used as media of instruction in schools. I worked on that, I did all that was necessary. They refused to print the materials. But since I was committed, enthusiastic, all the materials we used for 2 years were handwritten. But we cannot continue. You cannot write books with your hand and expect children to learn throughout the whole school system. It's impossible. So I left them. I went back to London, where before even I went back to Gambia, I was given that job, a research job in London, which was a fantastic research job because it was a research on all the languages of Africa, including Arabic. Three items. First, inventory of all the languages of Africa and their interrelationship. 2, a writing system for all the languages for Africa, including Arabic. 3, a language map of Africa. The research was for 3 years, from 80 to 82. My part of the research was precisely a writing system for all the languages of Africa. But before the research, UNESCO had organized a series of conferences, the culmination of which was the one that took place in Niamey in 1978. And the experts developed a writing system they called Africa Reference Alphabet. My research group in London took that alphabet, enriched it to make it capable to write every language in Africa, including Arabic. But how many countries are using this system to develop their languages? Very few. But it is our responsibility, we who call ourselves African intellectuals, it is our responsibility. Our education is meant to be used as a tool to develop our continent. How can we catch up? Without using the tool with which we can do anything, I will tell you that Africa is engaged. You don't know it. If you care to know, the fact is that Africa is engaged. Because if you take their notes, you can hardly read and understand what they write. They write street language. We write book language. That is the big difference between we who learn foreign languages and those children to whom they are natural. They speak and write language that is spoken in the street. We write and speak language that is written in books. And it takes a lot of time and energy to do that. In other words, one of the reasons why education has been retarded in Africa to learn these alien languages. And it is a paradox that almost 6 decades of independence on the African continent, language issue has not been seriously posed by any leader or by only very few. I have been particular about language since my childhood, and I have been following the question of language from that up to the time I am standing here now. And it's one of the reasons why when I went to university, I decided I did 2 first degrees together. I did one in social science, my major in philosophy, and sociology as my minor. But after that, after my fourth, I abandoned it, and I continued with linguistics. Because that is the only tool I can use, or anybody who is interested in the issue, to change the language situation on the continent. Africa is the only continent in the whole world where foreign languages still hold sway in the domains of officialdom and scholarship. They are the languages which are used as official languages. They are the languages which are used as media of instruction from preschool to university. The only continent in the whole world. This is incredible. Sometimes I wonder whether we who call ourselves African intellectuals do ask ourselves this fundamental question. This is a crime that we have been committing against our people. And we all are glad about it, because the fact of learning these alien languages, it gives you a new status. Because it's the only language that gives you access to employment. It is the only access that gives you privileged status in your society. But our constitution, any of the constitutions in all of Africa, it is stipulated that we are all equal in the eyes of our law. But paradoxically, in the same constitution, it is stipulated that you cannot be a president, you cannot be a member of parliament, you cannot be a councillor, you cannot be in any elected position unless you read and write in English, in French, in Portuguese, and the rest. But nobody asks this question. We pretend we are elected by people we represent. And we speak languages that are alien to them, they don't understand. How sure are they that we are representing them? This is the paradox of so-called democracy and independence on the continent of Africa. We are representing people, thousands of people. In my country, 80% of the population are illiterate. English is alien to them. I was elected for almost 20 years. I was speaking on their behalf in parliament, using a language that they don't understand. Is it true that I was representing them? How sure were they? Because they were not understanding what I was speaking on their behalf in parliament. Was I speaking on their behalf? How certain is that? And that is for everybody who has been running in an elected position on the continent. But we hypocritically pound our chests that we are honestly representing our people. We must change. There is a need for a new revolution in Africa. One of the reasons why we have been tottering with development for decades, it is simply because we have been using a tool with which we are not familiar.
Now that is such a great speech, and I think Mr. Jata has spoken the hearts of many Africans. Whatever is happening to Africa is something that is very, very unfortunate, because most of the development agenda that they have, many times you have seen them crippled by Western nations, as it clearly states there that Europe does not want to see Africa develop. And that is the fact, because you find that they have always used their tricks to ensure that Africa remains in a continuous state of war, in a continuous state of disorganization, such that there is nothing good that African leaders can sit down and create within their countries. And I think it is such kind of acts that has seen many African countries come up against European nations. For example, the Sahel region. This region is very hostile to the initial colonizers because they do not want to see the subjugation that is taking place with the help of Western powers continue to happen in their countries. For example, one of the major issues within these regions is the question of insecurity. And we see that governments upon governments have always tried to ensure that they bring in solutions. And where they have been defeated, they have even tried to use Western powers. Like, for instance, in Burkina Faso, there has been a continuous war. And it happened to be that French soldiers were in the country whose main purpose was that they were there to help in peacekeeping missions. But since they came in, there is no peace that is being achieved. Why could this be happening? It is because one research has shown that these Western nations, they come and they fund the rebels or even those aggressors against countries that they are going to. They fund them and also claim to be supporting the government so that the war within these countries continue in perpetuity without any concrete solution. Once this war continues and their soldiers continue being and occupying these countries, Western nations are able to use this to leverage their countries and have access to valuable mineral resources. And this is the same case that has been happening in Burkina Faso. We know that Burkina Faso is one of the leading producers of gold. And this gold has continuously been mined by French governments and then used in developing France. But Burkina Faso remains in abject poverty. In fact, as at now, it is estimated that over 40% of its population live below the country's poverty line. And this is something that is inexcusable. We have seen different strategies adopted to ensure that positivity is achieved, but nothing is coming on. So in my research, I was trying to find out why there is a lot of skepticism between Africa and Europe, and why most African nations do not trust Europe to be its ally when it comes to real development. And these are some of the things that I came across. And the article reads, the assertion that Europe is actively crippling African development is a complex issue and depends on various factors. The first one is economic relationships. Europe's economic policies, trade practices, and investment strategies can sometimes have mixed impacts on African development. For example, trade agreements and policies might favor European industries and affect local economies. That is a very, very serious fact. We have seen that the trade policies that these European countries continue to make have always favored European companies because they know that Africa is the place where there are natural resources and easily available. They come, use these natural resources, and then leave Africa without anything. The companies within the nations where these trade agreements have happened will be crippled because the priority of export of these raw materials will be to European countries. And this is one of the reasons why most African countries, while they are leading producers of raw materials, they still lack furnished and polished industries that can help in manufacturing these products to their finished points. Another one is the historical legacy. The legacy of colonialism and exploitation still affects many African countries, influencing the economic and political structures in a way that can hinder development. This is a very, very serious fact. For example, we've seen right now, most of the countries in the Sahel region have decided to kick out their former colonial masters. France is not needed in that region. Germany is not needed in that region. United Kingdom is not needed in that region. Reason being, they have historical impact on many development activities that are taking place in those regions. They have pacts that they signed with many leaders before that have been designed in a way that they will continuously cripple these countries regardless of which president takes power. And that is why we've seen countries like Burkina Faso has decided to have a coup, and they have this military leader, Ibrahim Traore, who is overseeing serious development in this country. And he has said that every mineral will not be mined out of that country and they are going to work to ensure that everything that is within the country is used to support the citizens of the same country. This is a positive move that I think in the end will bring positive development towards people in Burkina Faso and many other regions within the Sahel region. European aid and development programs can be a double-edged sword. While they provide crucial support, they can also sometimes create dependencies or be tied to conditions that may not always align with local priorities. This really reflects what major multilateral organizations like the IMF and the World Bank has been doing in Africa. They come with budget policies that are used to cripple the development within these countries, and this has resulted in negative impact within major economies. There is no country in Africa that has subscribed to IMF conditions and succeeded in their economic growth. This is something that has been noted everywhere, and we've even seen it in recent protests that even happened in Kenya. Another thing that is worth considering is the global trade dynamics. European countries, as part of the global economic system, can influence trade rules and practices that impact African economies. For instance, subsidies for European agricultural products can make it difficult for African farmers to compete. This is something that can be really seen in many aspects. Political and economic influence. European nations and companies may have significant influence in African countries, which can sometimes lead to decisions that prioritize foreign investments over local development. We have seen this happen in many times. European nations always have their preferred candidates in African elections. So they always try to push their agenda, and they want these leaders to take over government as opposed to those whom the general population want to take over the government. This has affected development in many countries, and we have seen it cripple growth of the African continent. And therefore, just as Dr. Sidia Jata has said, it is very important to note that Europe has no positive interest for the African nations, and it is upon African leaders to wake up from their slumber and smell the coffee and know that there is no policy that Europe will propose to ensure that Africa remains at the top and Europe goes down. As we have been told many times, Africa's growth will mean the decline of Western nations. Tell me down in the comment section what you think about this topic. And if you're watching us for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and also share. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless you. Goodbye.